I'm 92 years old, and I married the wrong person. I don't say that with anger anymore. I say it the way you describe the weather. It happened. I lived inside it, and now I'm close enough to the end to stop pretending it was something else. She's been gone for 12 years. A quiet stroke one morning at the kitchen table. I was the one who found her. By then, we had already lived most of our lives side by side. Two people who shared a house, a name, children. Two people who never quite shared the same heart. I'm not telling you this because I want sympathy. I had a full life by most measures. I worked steady jobs. I raised two sons. I paid off the mortgage. From the outside it all looked solid, respectable. But there is a difference between a solid life and a close one. At 92, you think about that difference a lot. The house I live in now is smaller. I sold the old one after she died. Too many rooms holding too many versions of us. These days, I sit in a chair by the window most afternoons. I watch cars pass. I watch the light move across the floor. Sometimes I catch myself talking out loud, as if someone is still in the kitchen listening. Silence is loud when it has years behind it. When I was 24, I didn't think about silence. I thought about getting ahead. I had grown up poor, not hungry, but close enough to it that I could feel it. My father worked hard and came home tired. My mother kept the house neat, like that might keep the world from falling apart. Love wasn't something we discussed. It was something you assumed, if the bills were paid. I met her at a church social. She was pretty in a careful way. Hair pinned just right, dress pressed. She spoke softly and laughed at the right moments. She came from a good family. Her father owned a hardware store. People respected them. My mother liked her immediately. She's steady, my mother said. You need steady. I mistook steady for safe. We didn't fall into each other. There wasn't that kind of heat. There was comfort. There was approval. There was the feeling that this was what you were supposed to do next. We courted politely, Sunday drives, ice cream, letters when I traveled for work. She would tell me about her day. I would tell her about mine. We didn't argue. We didn't confess anything raw or frightening. We didn't ask each other the questions that matter. I didn't know what those questions were then. I proposed on a park bench. She said yes before I finished the sentence. I remember feeling relief more than joy. Relief that I was on the right path. Relief that I wouldn't disappoint anyone. The wedding was modest. Family, friends, cake in the church basement. She looked happy. I looked proud. I told myself love would grow. And it did, in a way. But it grew like ivy on a wall. It covered things. It didn't go deep. The first few years were easy enough. We were young. We rented a small house. I worked long hours at the factory, then later in an office when I got promoted. She kept the house clean. Dinner on the table at 6. Laundry folded. We talked about practical things. Groceries, bills, my boss, her sister's latest trouble. When I came home tired, she would nod and listen. When she was upset about something, she would mention it lightly, like she didn't want to take up too much space. There was a carefulness between us. Our first son was born when I was 29. I remember holding him and thinking, now this is what it's about. A family, a purpose. I loved my boys. That was never in question. I went to their baseball games. I fixed their bicycles. I taught them how to shake a man's hand. In those moments, I felt something close to joy. But even then, in the quiet after the games, when she and I were alone at the kitchen table, I felt a distance, like we were co-workers assigned to the same project. We rarely fought. People used to say that about us. You two never argue, that's the secret. It wasn't the secret, it was the warning. We didn't argue because we didn't reach for each other in the first place. You only fight when you care enough to push back. There were small signs, but I ignored them. I remember one night, maybe 10 years into the marriage. The boys were asleep. I was sitting in the living room reading the paper. She came in and sat across from me. "Are you happy?" she asked. It wasn't dramatic. She didn't cry. She just asked. I lowered the paper and said, "Of course. Why wouldn't I be?" She nodded, but she didn't look convinced. I didn't ask her the same question. That moment comes back to me now more than I'd like. I had chances. There was a woman at work in my late 30s. Nothing happened. I want to be clear about that, but when she laughed, it felt different. It felt like something was waking up in me that had been asleep for years. I went home one evening after talking with her and felt restless. I looked at my wife setting the table, moving carefully, predictably. I felt guilty for even noticing the difference, so I buried it. That's what I did with most things. I buried them and called it maturity. The years moved the way they do. slowly at first. Then suddenly the boys were in high school, then college, then gone. When the house got quiet, it was just the two of us again. I thought maybe this was our chance to finally talk about something real. But by then, we didn't know how. We would sit in the living room in the evenings, the television on low. Sometimes she would knit, I would read. Hours could pass without a word. Not tense, just empty. One night she said, "Do you ever wonder what it would have been like with someone else?" I pretended not to understand. With someone else, how? I asked. She shrugged. Just different. I said something about how that was foolish talk. We had a good life, healthy children, a paid-off house. What more did anyone need? She didn't argue. She just nodded and went to bed. Looking back, I think she was braver than I was. She at least named the emptiness. I hid behind responsibility. People admired us. That's the part that still stings. We were the couple others pointed to. No scandals, no shouting matches, no divorce. But admiration is not intimacy. In our 60s, she grew quieter. I told myself it was age. I told myself everyone slows down. One afternoon I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring out the window. The same table where she would later collapse. "What are you thinking about?" I asked. She took a long time to answer. "I think we did what we were supposed to do," she said. "I just don't know if we ever did what we wanted." I didn't know how to respond. What did we want? We had never really asked. When she died, the grief surprised me. Not because I didn't care. I did, but it wasn't the kind of grief you see in films. It was complicated. I mourned the years. I mourned the routines. I mourned the woman who had shared my bed for 6 decades. And I mourned the marriage we never had. After the funeral, people told me how lucky we had been. 68 years together, they said. What a blessing. I nodded, but longevity is not the same as closeness. Now at 92 I sit alone most evenings. The boys call. They visit when they can. They have their own lives. I don't blame them. I think about that young man on the park bench proposing because it felt right on paper, because everyone approved, because he was afraid of being alone or disappointing his family. I don't think he meant harm. He just didn't know that choosing the wrong person isn't about choosing someone cruel. It's about choosing someone who doesn't see you and whom you don't fully see in return. You can live an entire life beside someone and still feel like a guest. If you're young and listening to this, I'm not telling you to chase fireworks. I'm not telling you to expect perfection. Marriage is ordinary most days. It's laundry and bills and tired evenings. But it should also be the place where you can say what you're afraid of, where you can ask, "Are you happy?" and wait for a real answer. It should be the place where silence feels shared, not separate. I stayed because leaving would have been hard, because it would have disappointed people, because I convinced myself that good enough was enough. Good enough can last a lifetime, but it can also leave you at 92 wondering what might have been. I don't regret my sons. I don't regret the stability we built. I'm grateful for the life we managed. There were holidays, there was laughter, there were small kindnesses. She was not a bad woman. We were just wrong for each other. That's a quiet tragedy. No broken dishes, no slammed doors, just two people slowly settling into something that never quite fit. Time does not give you a refund. If this story means anything to you, just sit with it for a while. Ask yourself the questions I didn't ask, not out of fear, not out of duty, but honestly, you only get so many decades. At 92, the past feels closer than the future. I can almost see that park bench again, the trees, the sunlight, her expectant face. I sometimes wish I had said, "Let's wait, let's be sure," but I didn't, and now the house is quiet. I don't have many years left. I can feel that. I'm not afraid of dying. I'm more aware of what I didn't fully live. When people remember me, they'll probably say I was steady, reliable, a family man. That's not untrue. It's just not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I was afraid to choose with my heart. And fear is a patient thing. It will sit beside you for 60 years and never once raise its voice, until the house is empty, and you finally hear it,